Nate Dewberry here, Director of the Redeem. I'm very excited about the episode we have of the podcast today. The Redeem's all about connecting guys in supportive community. And today we have Rock Sandretto. Rock, we welcome you to the show. Rock is an entrepreneur, business owner, married to Brittany, has 4 kids, and we're just thrilled to have you on the show today to share your story.
Thanks, man. I appreciate being here. This is going to be a lot of fun, man. I'm excited.
It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We'll jump in with some random questions just to throw some things out there and get the conversation started. First, I'd like to know, who do you admire the most?
Well, this is going to be kind of sappy, but I admire my wife a lot. I mean, I think her walk with God's really unwavering. I mean, she's prayed me through a lot of stuff. She's a strong businesswoman, but she loves the Lord. So that's probably who I would admire the most.
Rock, I love that. My wife is probably the person I would say as well. And I think for us to be the men that we need to be is to have an amazing woman beside us that encourages us, that believes in us, and honestly sees the best in us. We don't know if there's anything good in us. And
That's
so
true.
I can relate to that one, definitely.
That is true.
What's one of your favorite memories with your kids?
Skiing, man, snow skiing probably. We're going on another trip in January for my 40th birthday, so we're going out to Breckenridge. But yeah, skiing with the family. I also take the kids. I have a Land Cruiser that's built out, so we'll go out to Colorado for a week every summer. So I'll take the younger 3, and so that's something fun we do every year. So a lot of good family memories, man.
Awesome. Your favorite book or podcast?
I got to plug Wealth Without Wall Street, man. Solid guys. It's about passive investing and passive income. They're all legacy minded people. So that's the podcast. Book, man, I just read this awesome book, and we'll probably get into it a little bit later. It's called 18 Summers, and it talks about how you have 18 summers with your kids. And we'll go into it a little bit deeper, but it's you kind of it's called a board meeting with each kid independently from your spouse. You do it once a quarter. It kind of changed, I feel like, the dynamic, and being able to have open conversations with each kid.
Awesome. We'll definitely be picking that one up. What's the most adventurous thing that you've ever done?
Wow. I like to do stupid challenges. So like last year, I hate running. So last year I ran a half marathon. I've hiked 40 miles in a day just to see if I could do it, stuff like that, man. I like to push my body physically and just, and mentally. So yeah, probably stuff like that, I would say.
One of your favorite Bible verses?
Oh man. One thing I suck at is memorizing the scripture. I don't know if I have a favorite verse, but right now I'm reading Acts, and it's the story of Paul and all that. And dude, those guys were just bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, the stuff they dealt with, I don't know. They're just real dudes. They're not weak men. So that whole Acts, the whole book of Acts, is pretty sick, honestly.
No, Acts is awesome, and I think about the story as soon as you said Acts, was Paul being stoned and then getting right back up.
Yeah, I mean, that was wild, dude. I'm like, I know, it is crazy because at church Sunday, Charlotte Gamble just went over Acts, and I had been reading through it. But yeah, that was wild, man, because he was like out there for dead. They were like, yeah, no life in him. Everybody thought he was dead. Then he like stands up, walks right back into the city. I'm like, dude, I mean, that's a man.
Yes, there's no weakness in that one.
No.
As you think about our community of men, what's one word of advice that you would give the guys?
Wow. Giving fully to God, I would say, instead of like half stepping into it. I think that's the biggest change, because when we're coming out of something, you want to give it all to God, and you say those things. But then there's so many times when we hold back, like, oh, you can have all this part, but not this other part. And I feel like that's the lesson that God wants us to learn in redemption, is like, you have to trust fully in Him, because you've tried it your own way, right? So it's like, to me, it's that. It's like, if you're going to do it, go all in. I mean, you go all in on everything else, right? I mean, you're either in business or, world stuff, drug, whatever it is, that's the way I was. I was just all in 100%. So it's like, just go all in and surrender, I guess is the big word.
Well, you mentioned kind of your background, and so I'd love, Brock, if you'd share a little bit about your own journey, how you grew up, and your struggle with addiction, because I think oftentimes people think, oh, somebody that struggled in this area can never overcome, or it limits their life. And I think in so much of your life, at least what I've heard of your story, is that God really has magnified so much of your growth and your experience, honestly, because you learned some things, even in difficulty and even those challenges, about going all in. So I'd share a little bit about that.
Yeah, man, here we go. Let's get it going, right? Okay, let me say this first. I feel like God has a call on everybody's life, but I think Satan has his own agenda as well.
Yep.
I feel like a lot of people that I've talked to that's had past drug addictions, and this doesn't go for the whole thing, but the few I've talked to, they're all kind of like me, and very addictive personalities. You're going to go all in 100% no matter what you do. And so I think, like, for me, I was all in on that world, right? And so God had this other plan. He's like, man, if you go in all in with me, things are going to change. But for so long, I went in the other way. So my dad's I grew up a great family. My parents are believers. They actually go to our church now. But my dad was a pastor, so I grew up. My mom was a school teacher in school. I don't know, man. My personality is like, I always had to like try things, no matter what my parents would say. And I tell you, another big thing too for kids is having a mentor for your kids. I think that's huge too, because I never had anybody I could like bounce ideas off or whatever. I was actually telling my oldest daughter this story the other day, but it was like I had in high school. I had this good group of friends that were like, went to church, everything like that. And we had tons of fun together. And then I started playing sports, football, and I had this whole other group of friends, that like to party, go out on, after the games on Friday night. Um, and for some reason, I kind of chose that path more so. I just felt like I was missing out if I didn't go to the parties. I was on the team. I was like, I feel like I got to be in it. I never really drank alcohol, but like pills were my thing. So like, I don't know, probably seventh grade, started smoking weed, and then, taking pills here at, at school every once in a while. Uh, and I didn't do it necessarily to unplug from the world. I don't think. I think it was more so I just kind of wanted to not even fit in, but it's just like I wanted to try everything there was, pretty much. That was like my mentality. So through high school, smoked weed, never did anything. I mean, pills are bad, but like it wasn't like Xanax or anything like that. It was like, I don't even remember what it was, but my senior trip when I was 18, I went down to Panama City Beach, Florida for my senior trip. And I went to a school called Oak Grove, and anyway, Hueytown and Pleasant Grove, which are two other schools close in our vicinity. We all went down together, and I knew some of the people from the other schools, but I got hooked up with some people from Hueytown. Not bashing Hueytown at all, but these people were a little bit heavier into cocaine, oxycontins, like a little bit heavier drugs, than what I've ever experienced. And so I started hanging out with that group, and I started selling drugs. I got with another guy, and me and him put our money together, and so we started ordering oxycontins from Germany and getting them shipped to here, and then we started selling them. I would do Xanax every once in a while. I didn't really care for it. I would just smoke weed all the time, and I would sell those pills. So the oxycontins, you started making money, and then I decided to try it one day. I was just like, well, we're going, to a club or something. Let me try one. I tried it, and then it went to, once every 2 weeks, once every week, a couple times a week. Then it'd been like every day. And so then everything I was selling was just trying to cover my drug addiction. So yeah, man. So I got really bad off on that. I did a lot of bad things. My parents tried to do everything they could, but the biggest thing they did was pray through it all. I mean, it was never. I was such a rebellious kid, so it's like no matter what they said, I didn't really care. I was a hellion, bro. Thinking back at it now, I'm like, man, I'm and I've talked to my dad, and my mom about it, and just like, I'm so sorry, I was so stupid. I mean, I can't imagine being on this side now with kids, like having to go through that, because I would steal from them. I mean, everything that you could do bad, I feel like I did it. Um, pawn stuff. When you think about it, you're like, man, I was, it was bad. But um, yeah, so I started dating this girl from Hueytown too, and she was bad on drugs as well. So like those two combination, it was just there was no hope. I went to college, dropped out of school just because my grades were terrible, and I just cared about getting high. Um, that kind of came into a time when it was like I was doing it more to feel normal. So I would start like still taking the same amount, but not really doing it to get high, just to feel normal and be able to carry throughout the day. I wanted to stop. I tried to stop multiple times. I just couldn't ever stop. I never really talked to anybody about it. Like I never talked to my parents. I feel like they just, I mean, I'm sure they could see it, but I never had anybody to talk to. Um, and then my ex girlfriend at the time, or my girlfriend at the time, she was doing it too. So it was kind of impossible. Um, we broke up, and I started doing methadone. So you've heard of the methadone clinics, stuff like that. So with methadone, I researched how you're supposed to scientifically take it to come off drugs.
Yeah.
And the methadone clinics, first of all, they don't really do that. They kind of get you on it, and it's a wonderful government, covered drug program. But not bashing that either. But anyway, so I started halving the doses. So I got down on a super low dose. Like I was like taking, I think it was like 2.5 milligrams, and it was just so I wouldn't have withdrawals. And I had a job. I met my wife, Brittany, at the time. So she went to cosmetology school with my sister. And so I met her. She didn't know I was on methadone. Like I said, I was just taking enough to get by. Um, I'm sure I'm missing out some parts, so I'm just going to give you the rough line. I got a DUI around that time, and they put me on task, which is like where you call in a color. If your color comes up, you go pee. I knew since I was on methadone, I would go to GNC and buy one of the drinks that you can pass a pee test with, and so I would take those. I'd have to go like once a week. That lasted a year to try to get that DUI off my record, and so at the end of the year, me and my mom went to court. It was my last court appearance, and the judge was like, when's the last time you peed? And my parole officer was like, it's been a week or two. And she was like, well, go to the back and pee. And I was like, oh, frick. Because I didn't take a drink, I was just like, hey, I'm done. Go into the back. I pee dirty. I come out. I tell my mom, like, hey, mom, I smoked some weed. Like, I failed it for weed. And that's like, you're mandatory in jail for 48 hours. So that's, when you fail a drug test like that. She was, all upset. It was terrible. So I didn't tell her I failed for what I failed for. I just said, weed. I thought that was a lesser of evils, right? Sat in jail for 48 hours. So my dad's church at the time, they were big with the Foundry. So the Foundry in Birmingham is like a big recovery center type thing. They do some amazing work. And it was wild, man. I was like, so I started detoxing in jail. So it was that first 24 hours, your symptoms aren't crazy yet, but you can tell it's about to get bad. So I couldn't really eat. I wasn't hungry, and I was sitting out in the common area in the jails. I don't know what you call it, but outside the cell, but like where everybody's eating. And this guy comes up to me, and I guess he sees my name tag, and he's like, he recognized my last name. He's like, I know who your dad is. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, man. He's like, you don't belong here. And I was like, I think that was like that realization, that first snap that God kind of planted of like, because I would see all these people around me, and I'm like, man, what am I doing with my life, And so I got out. My dad picked me up after that 48 hours, and I told my family, I was like, look, I'm addicted to methadone, I've got this at home. So I went home, we flushed everything. Then I was telling my parents about the detox situation because they didn't really have any kind of clue. So I was like, look, it's going to be like 2 weeks of hell. I was like, don't let me out of the house. Just stay with me. Don't let me go anywhere by myself. Kind of like setting up some perimeters. And that's what happened, man. It was 2 weeks of the worst suck I've ever been through in my life. It was, couldn't sleep. The only way I could sleep is if like, my girlfriend, which is my wife now, but she was my girlfriend at the time. She ended up staying with me. We broke up, but she was like, I'll stay with you until you get clean, just like moral support, which was amazing. So like the only way I could sleep at night was if my parents or her and my sister would drive me around the interstate around Birmingham, like the 459, the huge loop. For some reason I could fall asleep in a car. It was wild. But as soon as I got home, man, I'm just wide awake, nothing works. Um During that, and I smoked cigarettes all the time too. And I remember when my body started, coming off of that, everything tasted different, because I feel like you've killed your senses for so long. You just don't experience, you've numbed everything. So yeah, I went to about 8 days in, I went to Bradford and I was going to get checked in. I was like, there's no way I can do this by myself. I was like, it hurts too bad. I just can't do it. And there was a nurse there, which I think was I have these like moments where I feel like God was like speaking into it. And so she talked to me and she was like, look, man, she's like, detox is like a bell curve. She's like, you've hit the top and it'll start getting easier as you continue. And like I said, I was about 8 days in. So I was kind of like on the other side, that worst part. And so that encouraged me really, really good. So we ended up not checking into Bradford. We came home and I just kept pushing through it. Started reading my Bible a lot, just trying to be like, pour God in, trying to pray. Um, and then sure enough, man, like at 14th, 15th day, the symptoms started subsiding and uh, I was all in. I had to still go to parole. And they were telling me, like, when I went to the parole officer the first time, they set me up with a new lady. And she was like, look, you're not going to be able to do this. She was like, if you fail again, it's 72 hours in jail. If you fail after that, it's, I don't know, a week or I can't remember. And so that was kind of discouraging, right? Because it was like, you can see where the enemy's trying to talk as well. So it was like, she was like, nobody's can do that. You've got to have help. You've got to get into a rehab, all this stuff. And, but I felt confident. I felt like the Lord had taught, I knew the path to do it. And I feel like I had that support, just like this, your community that you're talking about, like having that support of people around you. And for me at that time, it was my family and my wife, which was the girlfriend at the time, and just trying to be around me. And I feel like I felt so clean just being able to tell everybody because you hide stuff for so long. And then I feel like the only true way to get healing is to be able to vocalize what's going on, right?
So
Because if you don't vocalize it, I feel like that defeats the enemy. First of all, I feel like the enemy's like wants sin to be hidden and wants everything to be hidden. So I feel like that is that first step of defeating the enemy. Then you have a team of people around you that are pushing you and supporting you. And that's all a God thing, right? I mean, that's how our daily walk with God is. As we were talking before the podcast, like if you don't have a group of men around you,
yeah.
what are you doing? It's so hard to do life alone. I mean, it really is. But so yeah, man, got off, came clean. Started going to this program at my dad's church. It's a non-denominational church, and it's all about your spirit, the Holy Spirit, and cultivating that, and being led by the Spirit, and like this body that we're in, right, on the earth is just like an astronaut suit. You know what I'm saying? It's like we're here, but nothing we're doing is for the purpose besides furthering the kingdom. I mean, that's what we're called to do, is to further the kingdom. So it was a very good thing. I needed it at the time. My wife, which ended up getting back together, of course, but she went through the things with me. It wasn't necessarily like a drug rehabilitation, but it was more like just pumping God in, and
5%.
yeah, it's discipleship. That's all it is. And this guy gave a cool illustration. One of the teachers during that, and it always sticks with me. He was like, he drinks a cup of milk every morning. And so he drinks a cup of milk and then he sits it under the faucet. And whenever you have like a empty milk glass and you turn the water on, it's cloudy at first until eventually that water cleans out all that cloudiness. And he was like, what your walk is like is you got the world in there. So until you put enough God and Jesus in there to pump out all that other stuff, you're not going to be clear. It was a cool illustration for me, and I still think about it. If I ever wash out a milk glass, I'm like, oh yeah, this is it, But it was true, man. And so I was listening to sermons. I was just trying to do all I could, and I feel like at that point, because I was saved, when I was younger, I grew up in church, but I feel like that point was like that rededication thing of being like, this is the way I want to go. My wife and I ended up getting, like, we were together. I was probably clean for about a year. We ended up getting pregnant with my oldest. We got married like 4 months later. So we've been married 17 years. I'm 40, so I don't remember what age we were when we got married, but she was young. She got pregnant. I think she was 18 when, or eight, yeah, around 18 when she was pregnant. So then we had all of that life to figure out, right? I mean, I dropped out of college, no good job. I'm working at this um, company. We're actually looking at trying to buy the company now. It's kind of full circle. It was kind of crazy, but I started working at this company, and they were great with me. Not making any good money. And then we moved in with my in-laws, and still working just crap jobs. And I finally got a job at the coal mines, underground coal miner, for 6 years.
A lot of people don't
Um,
realize that. A lot of people don't realize there's coal mines in Alabama.
Dude, there's so many coal mines. And one interesting fact, because I'm like a nerd on information, like I like science, I like all the useless information. They said that under Birmingham, like anywhere you're walking in Birmingham or around that area has been mined under, which is wild because you don't think about it, you know. And even people that live here, they're like, "Where's a coal mine at?" You know. Um, During that time, though, it was a lot of, I think, restoration with God. I think it was just, I felt like, okay, this is where God has me. But it wasn't until I accepted it and was like, okay, well, what can I do to change the people around me here? Kind of like being in your now, like where God has you in this growing season. Um, because I was there 6 years, and probably the last two, uh, I kind of accepted that, and I was like, okay, Lord, if you've got me here, let's go. So I was able to talk a lot about God, and I feel like I'm a pretty easy, cool dude to talk to. So it's like I wasn't like coming at people, but I was like trying to, like, what I'm saying, just talk to people about the Lord and about life, and about that. The I guess the sixth year in that, God started opening up more opportunities and doors, and my wife wanted to open her hair salon. So we were praying through that during 21 days of prayer. I remember I called because we sold everything we had, so we had 6 months of savings saved up to start this business. But I was still in the coal mines. I was making decent money, and I called my dad. My dad's like spirit filled, like amazing man of God. And so I called him. I was like, Dad, I want you to be praying for something. I was like, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. I was like, but to me and Brittany, we were like, should I quit my job, or what's our next steps? And so, like, before he got off the phone, he talked to the kids, and then he talked to me the last thing. He's like, I feel like the Lord's telling me the time is now. And I was like, wow, okay, because I didn't tell him anything. I didn't want to like give him any clues, right? So that was a cool confirmation. And then it was also during 21 days of prayer. Matt Miner, one of our pastors at Highlands, had a message on not being selfish with your prayer during 21 days of prayer, but praying for other people in similar situations. And so I had a couple of guys that were praying through career change. And so I just kind of dropped my focus on myself and started praying for them. And then, man, like the only time I've ever heard like God clear was, it was a 45-minute car ride at 5 o'clock in the morning, to go to the coal mines. And that was like my prayer time. And I felt like it was like that audible, put your 2 weeks, like quit your job.
Yep.
So I called Brittany. I was like, hey, I really feel like the Lord's telling me to quit. She was like, well, go for it. So I was like, oh crap. So I put my 2 weeks notice in, man. And then 2 weeks to the day, we opened our first location. And then, man, God's blessed that business tremendously. And I think it's just all kind of like what we said earlier. I think it's about going all in. Not that you're going all in for blessings, but I feel like God sees your heart during that change.
Yep.
So I feel like a lot of people have God in this thing of like a ATM type thing, right? Like it's like, well, I'll do this if you do this, but he's going to do way more than you could ever imagine. But you have to give up that control, which goes back to the addiction thing. It's like, which way do you want to live? So yeah, man, once we did that, it was like, I don't know, that was in 2015 is when we opened that first location. So
You
salon's still going great.
do you go back to that moment a lot to reflect on the faith and what God's done since then? Since you share that as kind of the unique moment where you feel like God really spoke to you, is that a moment you kind of like a Old Testament talks about like memorial stones, like things that you kind of cling to and remember the faithfulness of God?
Probably not as much as, I mean, if we're being honest, probably not as much as I should. Um, I don't tell our story. Like, I honestly don't, whenever I can tell my story, I'll tell my story, but I don't have like the opportunity to just talk about it all the time. Uh, but whenever I do, it for sure brings it back up. And we've taken so many other steps where we had to have God's faithfulness too. So it's not like everything's been gravy since that 2015 when we opened that thing. It's just God keeps showing up every time. When we get to a point where we're like left or right, the Holy Spirit kind of leads us in one direction and it ends up being God. And you're like, heck yeah, man, we made the right decision. So yeah, probably not so much, you know, I mean, the kids, I think the big thing too is legacy, right? So I want my kids to know our story and know everything. So, because that's really what's going to live on. I mean, we can tell people, and hope, our testimony helps them, and that's what the testimony's for. But I think your kids and your legacy for your family name, I think that's where the impact, most impact's going to come from, is how you impact your children. Um, so yeah, so I guess that's in a nutshell. I probably should think about it a little bit more.
Well, speaking of your kids, tell me a little bit about how you're intentional with investing in your kids, because if that is your legacy and what you're trying, there's some things that you've walked through that you probably don't want your kids to walk through. How do you, as a parent, as a team with your wife, care for your kids, invest in your kids? Maybe even speak to the book you mentioned, 18 Summers, and how you're using that.
Yeah, man, I can go off on this one for a while. I'm really passionate about my family or family in general, but of course my family and my kids. So we always kind of give a little backstory. I mentioned that Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Like we got to a point, and God has blessed us, but we would have capital saved up and we would start new businesses because we didn't really know what else to do. We're not in Wall Street that much. We try to do like private lending, more private stuff. In this group, I went out to Scottsdale for their retreat, and me and my wife and I did, and they were about not just making money, but the legacy you leave behind to your kids. Like what do you want your kids when we pass away? Is the money that we leave to your kids going to be stewarded just like you were still here, right? And each kid has their own personality, their own way they want to do things. Um, so we have a holdings company now, and all our kids are part of it. So we have quarterly board meetings. We'll go on like a vacation or something and talk about all the investments we're doing and things like that, how we're giving, just so they're in on it. I think one big thing that people do not do, and I think it's just the way that we were raised, sex and money is never talked about or they're not talked about a lot in families. I know in my family growing up, it was I never knew my parents how, not that you have to tell your parents or your kids how much money you make, but stewarding, right? I mean, it's all stewardship. So I knew my parents steward well because we didn't need anything, but it's like that never that conversation. It was always just tithe, like well, you tithe, make sure you tithe, which is a crucial part, which we can get into later. But anyway, yeah, so we have our quarterly board meetings with our kids and all, and we go over all our investments that we're making, what's coming up, or if an investment comes up, we'll do a board meeting, kind of talk about it, just so they're around it. Not necessarily we're like, we do value their input, but the decision's not going to be necessarily made on that at this point. And then what I just started implementing was that 18 Summers, it's called a family board meeting. And so I actually just started last week. I took my two oldest. So you have the way the board meeting works is you have a quarterly outing with each of your kids. Each spouse does. So each kid goes twice every quarter. One with the dad, one with the mom. So my oldest daughter, who's 16, we went to Top Golf, and then we ate, and then rode scooters around Birmingham. But the conversation, so it's no electronics, so no phones,
Yep.
which is very hard, man, when you're used to communicating on email all the time and checking stuff. But it was so good, man, and the conversations go so deep so fast. So like some of the questions I would ask, and I got these from one of my other buddies, was like, what worries you the most right now? Like what keeps you up at night? What are you worrying about? And then the second one is like, what can I be praying for you for? Like, what do you need prayer for right now? And then the third one is, what do you need help with? Which I thought those were pretty good questions to kind of get a little bit deeper conversations. And they work great. And then my son, we went ziplining in North Alabama. So I don't know, man. I'm super excited that we started implementing these because you have we're here all the time. Like we're with our family all the time. We travel together. It's like our team, but having that one-on-one is so important with each kid because there's times when my kids will come up to me when I'm at the house or, in the office or something, I'm working and I'm like halfway listening because I'm trying to finish something. Um, and I think that's the problem with the youth now is we we're so busy. We feel like we have to be busy, even if we're not busy. We feel like we have to be, and so I think our kids suffer from that a little because they're not getting paid attention to, which then in turn they're going to find it from something else, right? I mean, if mom and dad aren't giving them the attention, they're going to whether
Right.
it's the opposite sex or drug, whatever it is, they're going to try to find some way to alleviate that pain. So yeah, I think that's a big thing, and so the legacy for the kids, man, like we're doing our trust right now, and just having all those parameters set up to where there's tons of like I don't know what you call them, not by I guess kind of like bylaws of like the steps that need to be taking place to so we're not planning on giving any kid just money, right? It's all going to go into a trust type thing, and it has to be used for certain things. So we're working through all that right now with the lawyer. So it's fun, man. It's great. I love it.
You mentioned earlier mentors and not really having those in your life. What do you do to make sure your kids have other voices besides your own voice in their life?
Man, so my daughter's 16, my son's 13, and then I have a 6 and a 5. Okay, so we're pretty spread out. So my daughter, she's a lot like me, man. She's like hard-headed. She wants to try things, and so we had a little issue with her in one of the local schools she was going to. And she was just trying to figure out some things out, and I kind of told her my story, and I was like, "Look, you're at that same crossroad I was in Panama City Beach. It's like hang out with the good friends or hang out with the bad friends,
Yeah.
and there's two different ways you go." And she chose a little bit of the wrong path for a while, and we prayed through it. And it was actually when I was on Thomas's podcast, like he was talking about like CEO parenting. I was like, I'm the worst parent ever. Like my daughter's going through all this stuff right now. We're praying through it. It's like I feel like the enemy always makes you feel inadequate, right?
Definitely.
I mean,
And
he's always good at that. So anyway, so this girl, Julia Simmons, she's amazing. She's probably 22, maybe 23. She wanted to start going on weekly dates, I guess, with Berkeley or my oldest, so they would go get coffee or whatever. And man, having Julia in her life, like we can never repay Julia. Like I mean, we love her to death, but she's to be somebody that age and just take time for a 16-year-old because you truly care about their heart is hard to find. You know what I'm saying? Most people are all over the place. So that has helped her out tremendously. And so the mentorship, I want to carry it on with my son. I don't know, I would like him to have that person reach out. So the 13-year-old, he doesn't really have the mentor yet, but I do want to, how do you even force that, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, because you want him to be able to like somebody too.
yeah,
It was a godsend for sure. So just praying that God, sends somebody his way as well. But the same thing with us, man. Like I have a mentor. Like I feel like we get to everybody, especially me. You get to this place where you're like, oh, I got it all together, and that's when the enemy attacks the worst. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? It's like you're like, okay, everything's going good. Like I'm cool. I'm gonna chill out with small groups. I'm gonna chill out with mentorships, and then Satan is like, okay, So going back to the community thing, man, is like just like what you're doing and what I do is like if you got to have that community, man. If you don't have the community, and that's what it is you have some people in there that are mentorships. I feel like our Christian walk, you always have three types of people with you. You have people that you're pulling along, trying to
yeah.
like help out and grow. You have people in your same level. Then you have people that are above you, right? And that's the same thing with marriage, having an older couple that's above you, friends that are the same age, and then younger couples that you're trying to help through different things. So, yeah. So, mentorship. If you think you can do it without some kind of a group or mentorship, you got a hard road ahead. I mean, you
Yeah.
know.
How did you find those mentors in your life? Like, because I think there's a lot of guys where they can go, hey, I know some men that I could invest in. I think it's much harder oftentimes for guys to go, who can I look to and what does this look like? I think, at least in my conversations, that's often the challenge for people to find somebody that they feel like is ahead of them that's really mentoring. What's that look like for you?
So I think you have a couple of different mentors, right? I think you have like a spiritual mentor. I think you need one in business, and then I think you just need a group of friends around you that call you out. Um, so for the spiritual people, I would just seek them out, like find somebody that I looked up to in a spiritual level, and then start having conversations, going on lunches with them, stuff like that. Just trying to talk to them,
Yeah.
and let them know where you are, and developing that relationship, because it's weird just being like calling somebody out, be like, hey bro, will you be my mentor? They're like, what the crap? I've had a kid ask me that before, and I'm like, dude, I mean, like, let's just hang out, what I'm saying? Like, it makes it so formal.
Yeah. It's
So
it's
yeah,
relationships, and it's
it,
people you gotta have somebody you enjoy being with, as well as somebody that, is just further along in that area than you are, and you can identify that, just by conversation. Like you said, if you make it formal, it can be super awkward.
It's so awkward because there's an when you make it formal, there's an expectation that things have to happen versus letting, like the Holy Spirit lead the conversation, or it naturally flowing, in certain ways, because you're waiting for an answer. And sometimes mentors don't have the answer,
Right.
sometimes you just need to talk to somebody, and get their advice. It is different now though, because you do get to certain levels, where maybe it's just you have a mentor and you don't necessarily talk to them about finances anymore, because you feel like, at that point you're kind of at the same, or maybe better. I don't know. So, I feel like it kind of changes. You know what I'm saying? I don't think, as we grow, especially men, when you want to be successful and you keep growing, everything like this, I think you have to change those people out in your life. Um, Same thing with the people in our mastermind group. Is like, they're business wise, and they're so far ahead of me that it's awesome, because I know I can keep growing, versus surrounding yourself on the same level. And that goes to life too. If you're struggling with something and all your friends are struggling and nobody's really doing anything about it, I'm like, man, I got to get out of this friend group and go to something that's going to push me to be better. No matter how much you love them and you really care about them, but like, we're all constantly trying to grow. And if you get in a stalemate with anybody, a spiritual, finances, or family, is like, you're going to be stale, and nobody likes a stale cracker. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
More disappointing than opening a bag and
I
thinking.
know. And then you just get that stale cracker. I mean, like, and that's we're not called to be stale. We're really not. We're called to be uh hot or cold, right? No lukewarm. So, like, where you want to be, bro. You know,
Yeah.
I want people on my team that's go-getters. That's all I can say.
You mentioned the financial mentors, and
Hmm.
you guys have, you are a business owner. You love I think in a lot of ways, a little bit going back even your personality, like you love a challenge. It seems
Mm.
like, at least from what I've gathered from you in conversation, and even listening to the other podcasts where you've been on, of just like it's a sense of adventure, adrenaline, to take a risk, take a step. Obviously, everybody's not wired that way, but I do think there's some financial principles that you can speak to that really help all men. And I think it's something that we often don't talk about. We can talk about, our what we love with sports, or our workouts, or, a lot of other things. And we often don't get, I don't think, really talk oftentimes with other guys about financial things. Oftentimes, I think because it's because fear of not having what somebody else has, or being looked at as not having their stuff together in the financial arena. So, is there anything that you would share just from your experience as you've learned and grown businesses that you think are important principles for guys to have in their life around financial provision for their family, around tithing, those kind of things that I think cross, you know, every guy's experience?
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, the first and foremost, like when you were talking just then, I've got two principles I'd like to share, but like the first and foremost are tithing. Like, if you're not, and it gets to be a point, and I remember when it was more of like an obligation. Let's be honest, right? Like, where you're like, okay, well, I got to pay my tithes, got to pay my tithes. Now, man, it's so much fun, because every year we want to. it's, and this might be sharing too much, and I'm not saying this is biblical, but like I look at my giving statement every year, and then every year I want to give more. So
Yep.
like I watch out where I am. I keep up with it quarterly. That's like a KPI I keep up with, and I want to give more every year.
Yep.
So I find it fun, right? Because I'm like, well, am I going to beat like just like a business? I'm like, okay, I want to beat last year. And I'm not saying you have to be like that. I think the big thing that it speaks to is where's your heart, right? Is it an obligation or is it a form of like praise? Because that's what it
Yeah.
is, praise and worship. It's
Mhm.
not a,
Do you enjoy it?
yeah, it's not even, we're not even in the law that it says you have to tithe. It's more of like, hey God, this is all yours anyways. You know what I'm saying? This $100 bill I just got, it's yours anyway. So what harm is it for me to give 10, 15 or whatever you feel led to give? It's like, it's a principle that once we understood and went all in, going back again to that all in thing, and went all in with it on every bit of finances, it's like God just keeps opening doors and like more fall in. And I'm like, it's kind of fun now. It's almost comical. It's like, but I remember being in those points where it was like I'm barely making ends meet, and I'm like, man, I've got to tithe, I've got to, and I've got to pay these bills. So I totally remember that place. But that was 20 years ago, and so to see how God does now, it's night and day. So yeah, so number one is tithe. I mean, I think if you've got to find that, you know, like I said, man, it's a form of praise and just being like, hey, everything I have is yours. And I think that's the one thing we get is like all our businesses we have are God's businesses. We're just stewarding them for him. So like any business decision, we're praying about it, like because it's not ours. It's like, what can we do with the finances to further the kingdom? That's really all it comes down to. So tithing is a big thing. Second thing is budget, man. I mean, like there's so many people and we're doing okay financially, but I still have a budget for my family. Just because we make more than we spend doesn't mean I'm not going to sit here and budget my family. So even my like we have a budget that we stick to, and so I've got it's called an operating system of the way money flows, and so it goes into a first checking account, and then our budget comes out of that checking account to our spending account, and then everything comes out of the spending account. All of this money goes into investments. So it's like that's just the way we roll. Um, so I'm actually going over my 16-year-old. She works at the hair salon, and so I'm trying to teach her to budget on which might be a lot. It seems like a lot, but it's $100 a week, right? I'm like, and it's teaching that small principle. I'm like, and she gets super upset. I'm like, look, I'm not pissed at you. Like I'm just trying to help you, right? Like I'm trying to go along with her and teach her that principle of budgeting, and then I can have those conversations of as well as like if you don't understand this principle of managing this small thing, how can we as a family entrust you to manage something bigger? Same thing with God. That's exactly what he says, like if you can't steward the small things, how can he entrust you with, something greater? And so that all goes back to tithing. And I mean, those are the two big financial principles, tithing and budgeting, because God's going to bless you, right? I mean, financially, tithing. Now, again, I've heard pastors, I was actually visiting a church the other day, and he was like, you want to give like you want to make. I totally disagree with that because I don't, that's another ATM thing, right? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to give God more because I want to make more. That's not, to me, that takes the whole principle of worship out of it. So I think you have to be careful of who you listen to on those messages for sure. But understanding that principle and what it is a discipline, right? It's just like reading your Bible in the morning, spending time in prayer and worship. It's a discipline, right? And disciplines suck at first. They're hard, but then they eventually get to where you're like, okay, I'm starting to get this. And I think when you start to get those small things is when God's like, okay, you're understanding this principle. Let me add a little bit more to you. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I don't feel like it's like an overnight success of like I'm gonna start tithing and then I'm gonna have $10,000 in my checking account. I think it's just that small, just keep going and God's faithfulness in it.
Yeah, we're supposed to do hard stuff, and it's so funny how we often understand that in the sports arena. We understand that with learning a new skill. Like this is going to be hard until I get to a certain place. And I think we forget that in the spiritual arena is that there is a discipline side of I'm going to do something hard over and over again, and then I'm going to see the payoff, and then I'm going to see the benefit, and then I'm going to see the blessing, and then I'm going to see the reward that God is who he says he is. but I've also got to put my time in it. I've got to, seek him like I really value him and that I really believe that he is worth this.
Yeah, I think we're in an instant gratification world. So
Yeah.
people are like, whether they're getting off drugs, they want to feel normal right away. But bro, like with me, like I spent 5 years in drug addiction. You can't just like a bad diet, man. If you got a lot of fat on you, you know what I'm saying, you're not gonna be able to get it off in a week. You have to put it's discipline and time. The same thing Christianity is, man. It's just discipline and time. It's just like growing closer to God. Not that you're getting anything in return. You have to have that expectation of like, I'm not doing this for something. I'm doing this because I want to be a better person, better Christian, and reach the lost. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, 100% agree on that.
You have 4 kids, multiple businesses, a lot going on in your life. We're talking about disciplines. What are those disciplines in your life, and how do you navigate and manage and make sure that one area doesn't get uh, to become the focus when it shouldn't be?
Yeah. So this was very hard when me and Brittany started the salon because we're business partners. We had a very hard time going on a date, being around the family without talking about business. So we actually made it now we'll still talk, like if something's going on, it's not a deep, long conversation, but we will now. But we made that thing of like, hey, look, we got to have personal time and business time. So that was crucial for our relationship, Brittany and my relationship. With the kids, we cut off, man. Like, I know this might sound lame, but at 2 o'clock, I'm done working. Like I'm not working past 2 unless something happens. Like I have to jump on a Zoom or something. And so at 2 o'clock, the kids are starting to come home. The older two homeschool, so they're here all the time. Brittany's coming home, and so we just chill out as a family, man. Like we watch TV, we do dinner. I'd say probably 90% every night, of the week. So we always try to make time for dinner, where we all sit down and talk. We always say our high and low of the day around the table. And I think that's a big thing. And then we're big on experiences, man. We want our kids when we pass away to still be close, and I'm sure everybody wants that. It's so hard to do that, like after the core members, right, pass away, is to keep everybody together. And so we've talked to a couple of different couples whose families still stay super close, and they're all older kids and they still see each other all the time. So we just asked them, man, we were like, what did y'all do? And they were like, we had fun. And so you're like, okay, let's have fun, So it really is, man. I don't travel a lot for work, I don't really have to, but like if I'm ever traveling by myself, man, I just miss my family, man. I miss the kids. I'm like some of my friends make fun of me because like they'll want to hang, and there's guy time to hang. I'm
Yeah.
not saying anything like that, but bro, I'd rather be at home just chilling with my family. I just have so much for my kids, like fun with my kids. I think it goes back to intentionality though. You can't expect these things to happen or hear somebody's story and be like, man, I want that, without putting work in. You know what I'm saying? It's like everything requires work,
Yeah.
So it's like it's just your priorities, right? It's like, where are your priorities? You have to, if you're going to want to be successful, that's amazing and awesome, but got to know how to cut it off, and I feel like there's success in everything in life, right? I mean, we know that. So family, your role as a father is to lead your family. That's what your legacy is, so you want to grow your family, grow your grandkids to change the world, right? Um, and that's where me and Brittany's heads are at. So we're like, we'll take sacrifices. We can still be successful, but know how to cut it off and really put time and effort into the family. I mean, that's the big thing.
Yeah, and you're even talking about that in your schedule, like when you end your time of that is obvious that family's a priority. Because a lot of people go, well, with all that he's got going on, wouldn't he be working at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night? And you've chosen to prioritize your family. And at the end of the day, whatever we allow to take time will take time.
That's true.
If we want to give it to our job or whatever, if we keep giving it, we will always keep giving it because it will keep taking it.
That's true. And I think one thing we've learned, and I feel like God's led us through with each of our businesses, is to have operators and people in place, because you can't run everything by yourself. You're limiting yourself first of all, and you're taking away time. So it's all, but it's planning. It's all being, diligent with what you're trying to accomplish. Stewardship,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
So
it's a big word.
yeah.
It's in everything. Stewardship.
What are the businesses that you guys have your hand in right now?
So we have the salon company. So we're about to do a second location with that. Hopefully Q3 of next year. And then we import hair extensions. So we have a hair company that imports hair extensions, and we're about to go live with our e-commerce site on that. We have an Amazon business that we sell products on Amazon. So we import from China and sell them on Amazon. It's all FBA. We have another investment company. So we have ATMs, oil and gas, land deals out west. All that runs through that LLC. We have a mold and water remediation company that I'm part owners 50-50 with another guy, and we have an operator for that. Yeah, and then our holding company, man. So the holding company manages it all. So that's what we got right now. That's where all our hands are right now.
Yep, a lot going on. I think the last thing I would love for you to share is somebody hears your story and they're like, oh, that sounds great, almost too good to be true. Like, how did he go from drug addiction to being involved in these businesses to God's blessing in his life? And I think sometimes we can put people like your story on a pedestal and go, well, man, I really want that. And like you said, we all have a different journey. But what would you say to a guy who is listening and they feel stuck where they are, like they're not growing? And you shared that the people you put yourself around are people who are growing. How do guys develop that culture in their life of constant growth and believe that there's huge things that they can achieve, whether it's financial things or whether it's a physical feat or whether it's investing in their family, something that really is stewarding what they've been given, because we've all been given something different. We all have different talents. How do those guys steward that well?
Yeah. So I got a couple of little points. I think it kind of hits everything, all the areas. First is going back to what you said, surrounding yourself. I heard this is in a book I read. I think it was the 10X, Grant Cardone, but it was like you want to surround yourself with people whose regular behavior is your desired behavior. Which if you can catch that quote, it makes sense in everything, right? So it's like you see a guy at church and you're like, man, I love the way he worships the Lord. Like, man, I wish I could get into worship like that. Well, man, start talking to it and cultivate a relationship with that guy and try to surround yourself with people like that. Same thing with small groups, man, or groups like yours. I think having people around you is one of the most vital things. But people that lift you up, you have different levels of friendship. You need level 5 friends. That's somebody that you can really talk to, and there's no judgment, but there's also correctiveness in it. So that you can talk to somebody and they're like, no, dude, that's a stupid decision, Nate. Why are you doing that? So you need friends that are like that as well. And then you need to be mentoring somebody under you, because everybody that's listening to this, no matter what level you are, you have somebody that you can help out as well. So I think it's helping people along the way as well. I think discipline too. I think some sort of discipline in your life, whether it's, hey, I want to run a 5K and you start training for it. I think physical and mental discipline is super important, especially for men. I feel like a lot of men, we can be weak. I think we don't push ourselves physically. I think we're out. A lot of us are out of shape. I think stewarding the body that God has given us is a huge thing. So I think once you create those small disciplines in your life of like, hey, I'm gonna get up every morning at 5 o'clock and run a couple of miles or whatever it is, ride a bike. I don't know, but I think it's important for men to do something a little physical, strenuous, where you're having those conversations with yourself, because that carries on into every other aspect of your life. Just like Bible reading, like we were talking about earlier, and I make a discipline every morning to get up and read my Bible before I do anything else. So it's like, I didn't always enjoy it. And sometimes I'll read it and nothing happens. I'm like, man, I didn't even get anything out of it, but it's still a discipline. So I think creating disciplines in your life, and then the financial thing, man, no matter how much money you got to learn how to budget. No matter if it's $50 a week or 10,000 a week. You have to learn to budget and then tithe, man. I think all those principles, are the top, I guess, your, playbook to becoming better, right? Because that's what we're all doing. It's we've had our business, like I said, since 2015, and before that, it was not all sunshine and rainbow. And still, having the business is not always sunshine and rainbows, right? I mean, you always have problems. You're always learning. Like even me, like I look at some people and I'm like, man, I want to be where he is, and it's like, but God's timing is so important. It's like if I had what I have now, back in 2015 when we opened our first business, it would not be good, man. It'd be a train wreck. I would not steward it well. I would probably have my head all blown up. It's just God knew exactly what he was doing when he's provided for our family and given us more and more. He knows where our heart is. But you got to have that connection with God too, bro. You know what I'm saying? You got to have those heart talks with God. So it's like, I don't know, that was like a whole bunch of principles in one, but they're all very, I feel like keynote, positions to be in to have some kind of a success or growth in general,
Rock, man, the one thing that sticks in my mind of our time talking is just all in, like, complete, wholly focused on it, going all in on something. And you've gone all in with your relationship with the Lord, all in the things that you've done in your life. And thank you so much for joining us today, dropping so many principles that we can apply to our life, and just hopefully inspiring some guys to try something in their life that maybe they haven't been doing, whether it's looking for a mentor or whether it's setting a budget, making sure they're telling their money where they want it to go. So thanks for joining us. It was such an honor. If you are listening today and you've enjoyed the show, please don't forget to leave us a rating or review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to our channel so that you can get the latest podcasts as we release those. This helps make sure that we get the word out to other men who are looking for community and looking for encouragement. So thanks for listening in, Rock. Thanks for joining us today. God bless, man.
Thank you, buddy.